Live from the chicken wing capital of the world, Buffalo, New York. You're listening to the Childcare Bridge Podcast, your source for the best tips, tools, and tactics on how to market and grow your childcare center, ensuring total domination. Total domination. This is the Childcare Bridge, and this is your host, Michael Tasner.
Hey there, and welcome to episode 14 of the Childcare Bridge. Today's topic is going to be answering one of our listeners' questions, and the question was kind of all things employees, but more specifically, Sarah wrote, Michael, I continue to have staff that leave. Some people leave quickly. Some people that have been here for a while have left. It feels like a revolving door. So this topic could go 25 different directions. But what I like to do, if you haven't noticed in the last 13 episodes, is that I like to distill things down and give you one or two action steps. Now, I might give you more ideas, but I want you to take those ideas and really fit it into your individual situation. I know it's very easy for me to say things like, go and raise your tuition by 20%. And you might be like, oh my gosh, he's crazy. But what if you could raise it 5%? And then that 5% can do other magical things. It's very easy for me to say, raise your team members' salaries by 10%, 15%, 30%. But you may not have those resources. So I want to give you what I am continuing to see happen day in and day out with childcare center owners in particular. Now, this might spill over to the directors if you have your directors empowered to make some of these personnel changes or personnel decisions. But at the end of the day, the buck stops at you, the owner. So the thing that I am seeing very, very regularly right now is turnover, and the number one reason that's being given, now take that with a grain of salt for just a second, is pay. Now you might say, well, why is that the case? Like, I know that it's like can be stressful at times, and there's probably other reasons, and there are, and we're going to dig into those in a minute. But if you get the opportunity to do exit surveys or exit interviews, the typical number one thing that's being mentioned right now and for the last 6 months has been pay. The pay is not enough. Now, if you look at everything that's going on in the world around us, if you look at inflation, you look at the economy, and I'm not an economist by any means, but things are not great right now. I work with hundreds and hundreds of centers just like yours, so I get a pulse. I've worked with thousands over the last 12 years. And not only childcare centers, but all other types of small business. So I have a pulse on what's going on. I can see trends. I can spot what's coming, how we're going to get past it, so on and so forth. And in this industry, staffing and all things employees is mission critical. So if you know that they're saying that pay is the number one reason, we need you to do a couple things first before you just start changing everything. And the first thing that I need you to do before you do anything else is you have to really get clear on your numbers. So re-listen to the episode. I'll link it in the show notes, but listen to the episode where I started talking through some of those financial metrics that you need to have a pulse on. You can't just run your business flying by the seat of your pants and just throw out a 10% raise here, a 20% raise there, and you really may not realize the ramifications. If you don't modify something else in your business, if you don't improve X, if you don't stop the leakage here, if you don't raise that, there's all of these levers that are kind of going up and down and operating kind of harmoniously. And if one of them gets way out of whack, then all of a sudden a whole bunch of other things get messed up. So let's just play this out as an example. Let's say you decide to give your team a 10% raise across the board. And I'm just going to use simple math, simple numbers. Let's say at the end of the day, you've got 10 team members, for example, and let's just say $40,000 they're making on average. So you just rose a pretty steep amount of money each month. Now, they're going to be happy, but what I'm finding is that money it's the surface level thing. It's the thing that it's most kind of top of mind because they're hearing that every day. They're seeing, like, they're feeling the impacts. They're going to the grocery store and seeing what a year ago may have cost, $150 is now $225. Like, they're seeing it, and they think that money is the only thing that they need. However, there's often deeper issues across your center. So the first thing is, before you start doing anything else, I need you to get clear on your numbers, because the chances are pretty high that I'm going to recommend to you a salary adjustment. And we can talk through how you can do it in tiers so that it doesn't massively devastate you financially. But in order to know that you can even do that, you have to know your numbers. How much profit are you making? Are you at the right ratios? Are you maximizing those ratios? There's a whole set of other things that, again, you have to make sure that those are in order. You can't just add $5,000 or $10,000 a month of expenses to your profit and loss statement if last month you lost $30,000 and your bank account is in the negative and you haven't taken a salary in 2 years. Those are deeper rooted issues. So step one is really getting clear on those financial numbers. Now, often when I go through that exercise with the center, we find low-hanging fruit. What's the thing that's paying your bills currently? It is tuition. If you're not maxed out on all of your ratios, if you're not full to the level that it's going to increase your profitability, increase your revenue and the profits, so it's not you add 5 students and you have to hire another teacher and that barely covers the kids, but almost always you're never properly maximizing those ratios for profitability. I want you to start pulling those levers first. And then if that's the case, you need to re-listen to my episode where I talked about doing reactivation campaigns where you're essentially generating revenue that cost you next to nothing. There are people that already raised their hand. Maybe they took a tour a year ago, but your follow-up wasn't great. There's always meat on the bone. Like, there's always revenue that you can go after. So now all of a sudden those numbers that you were looking at, they may have seemed a little bit grim, but then you realize, well, geez, yeah, if we had another 9 enrollments at $1,000 a month, that would increase our profitability by $6,000 a month. And great, that gives me a little bit of wiggle room if I decide to do some raises. So step one, get clear on your financial metrics. Step two is look for some meat on the bone. If those numbers are not where they need to be, you have to look at taking other steps first. Increasing wages is a Band-Aid. There's always a root cause to what's going on across your center. Typically, it's a lot of other things. It's not just one thing. So those are the first 2 things that I need you to do. The third thing that I want you to do is to conduct a blind anonymous survey. You can use a tool like SurveyMonkey, for example. You can use Google Forms, however you'd like to do this. But I want you to get a gauge of what do people really feel. Now, this one can open up Pandora's box, and I'll give you a bunch of real-life examples. One that I just saw yesterday because I coached a center to do this exact exercise, and it completely threw the owner into not a tailspin, but it was not a fun conversation after we looked at the results together. This survey is meant to get a gauge of, number one, how happy are your employees? So my favorite question to ask on surveys, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your happiness at work? I need to get that number gauged, and then at least once a quarter, I want to make sure that I'm sending out that exact same question once a quarter, and you're tracking that methodically. If that comes back, and in this case, the center's average happiness was a 6.6. So they had 14 people that responded, so most of their staff responded. 6.6. They were as low as 3, they had 110. But most people were 5 to 6 was really where most of the people ended up falling. The second question is similar to the first, and this one is an even better gauge, in my opinion. On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend working at our center to your family, friends, or others? That one, the center scored a 5.2. 5.2. So that's your net promoter score. It's a question that you should be asking your parents as well, but we're focusing on staff on today's episode. What those two things told me was that I wouldn't say people are miserable, but there were a lot of unhappy people. And number two, if they're not going to refer anyone, if you're at a 5, if you were to bring in some new people, so let's say these people had asked for raises, you say, I just can't do it, you bring in some new people. If you're keeping people that are massively unhappy, they are going to continue to put toxicity out across your center. And I've had the privilege to visit lots of different centers and just observe. And I look for a lot of the unconscious things. I look for what people are doing on breaks. What are they doing on lunch when they're not having lunch with the kids? What are they doing before work, after work? So as they're coming in before they clock in, I look at those things. And I don't want to say that I'm a spy, but I listen. And I'm always hearing gossip. I'm hearing, did you hear about this? Oh my gosh, we have a new family coming in that I'm told is bad. Like, I'm hearing all these different things. And then I'll ask, when was the last time that we collected information from you? So like a survey. Well, never. You need to know what your employees are really feeling. You need to know what your employees are really thinking. Now, on this survey, you want to ask other questions. What do you like most about working here? What do you like least about working here? On the happiness score, you want to have them give some context. So tell me about why you rated yourself a 5. And the survey that I looked at with this particular center, pay and benefits was mentioned in almost every single one of them. But then there were a lot of other things. Communication. We get communication through the water cooler. We don't hear it from the quote-unquote top. That's interesting. We don't get any praise. That one was interesting. And I found a lot of common themes. Now, the biggest common theme was pay and benefits. So let's set that aside for just a minute. What I like to look for when you do a survey is that if you can put some quick wins into your organization, you can at least start to show them that you are open to and willing to make improvements. But when you're doing that, you have to come clean isn't the best way to say it, but you have to have some radical honesty with your staff. Because there's this perception that you as the owner are making ungodly amounts of money, living in the biggest house ever, that you've got 20 different cars, you're always on vacation. Like there's this perception of the owner that they're filthy rich. And do I know some center owners that are filthy rich? I do indeed. But most center owners are doing well. A lot are struggling, but very few of them are like uber rich. And it's not that I want you to have this lunch where you're like, hey, I'm not making any money, so I can't pay you guys more money. It's a truth session where you're like, hey, I mean, this industry has been hit hard. Here are the things that we're looking at doing to continue to improve the situation for you, but also for the families. We're rolling out a tuition increase this month, and then we're rolling out a second one 6 months later. I do have the benefits person coming in December, and we're going to relook at, is there some things that we can do? But please also keep in mind that I know inflation, it has been getting all of us. We haven't been immune to that. We haven't raised our tuition in 6 years, but every one of our expenses has went up. So you're kind of giving them some radical honesty. And I'm not looking for you to grab sympathy. That's not what I'm after. I'm after for a little bit of humility. I'm after a little bit of a small amount of empathy to where they're like, okay, that took some guts for them to say, hey, we're okay, but we're nowhere near where we need to be. But if you can paint that picture, and that is where I'm coming full circle. If you can paint that picture, those are the centers that are having a better job retaining and hiring team. You're painting the picture that has a brighter future than where things are today. If someone doesn't see that they can make progress within your center and they see themselves only as a cog in a wheel and they don't see how they are making an impact, if they don't see your plan for growth, you're going to be like any other employer in any industry. And that is when you're going to have people that are leaving when you're paying them $13 an hour and they're going to leave for $15 an hour. In the grand scheme of things, when you look at $2 an hour after taxes, it's not a whole lot of money. But if you were able to paint that picture and say, hey, this is the roadmap of our center or centers. These are the cool things that we're going to do here. This is what I'm going to do in the employee break room. These are the activities that I have planned. And I ask that you continue to bear with me. And I promise you that I will continue to make these things happen. That is where you are able to start to nip things in the butt. And you're able to also use that brighter future to continue to attract better talent. Now, the asterisk to all of this is that if your wages are drastically lower than everybody else, and if they can go and make double what you're currently paying them, yes, painting a brighter future may help. Yes, if you have personal relationships and connections, that may help. However, if your wages are so far off, it's going to be very, very challenging for you to keep up. So in that instance, you have to go back to step one, look at your numbers. If you cannot afford to do any increases, you need to make some of those tough decisions. It's either a heavy tuition increase, laying people off and getting to different ratios or numbers, adding revenue swiftly, or closing your doors. But if you're paying, every state has a different minimum wage. New York, I believe, is 15. Some states, I think it's as low as 10 or even 8, for example. If you're paying 10 and Chipotle down the street is paying 17, and you're going after the junior teachers, for example, you're going after aides or helpers or things like that. Directors and such are obviously a different ballgame, or lead teachers. That's going to be tough. And I really encourage you to really look at your numbers to see what you can do to build a better workplace so that you can pay the wages that people need to live. You're going to have that revolving door. So if I go back to the question of, Michael, people are leaving on a regular basis, it feels like a revolving door, and they're saying it's pay and benefits. My mantra for you today is that that's a cause, but usually it's not the root cause. So here are your actions. So I'm going to recap. And I'm going to do a lot of other episodes and content around this topic because this is one that I'm hearing all day, every day. So the first thing that I need you to do is look at your numbers so you can start to see if you decide to make some changes by way of compensation, you know where you're at. And those numbers are going to tell the story. The second thing I want you to do is to make some of those tweaks or pivots to make sure that your numbers improve. The third thing is to execute an employee survey. And that is where that could go into different directions. But look for what are some of the quick wins that you can put in place that may not cost you a lot of money that you know, yeah, I can get that fixed. The cleaning company used to come X amount of times. Now we've scaled it back by 80% and it's doubled my workload. There are going to be some things that you probably didn't expect to see. If you ignore the survey, you're going to be toast. Like it's going to completely backfire. But I encourage you to take the results, take them on the chin, schedule a sit down with your team, talk through the results, but talk through what you are planning to do, some proposed timelines. And if you decide to give raises, my last piece of advice for this episode is you want to do them incrementally. That's also one of those little carrots. So great. In December, we're going to increase you by 4%. In April or March, we're going to increase you by another 3%. And then in June, we're going to give you another 3%. So in less than a year's time, you are going to have a 10% increase in your pay. I'm also doing XYZ across our center or centers to continue to improve everything for our team because you guys are highly valued. That's how you start to make some changes. But it's not just throwing money at the problem. Again, if you don't know your numbers, that's going to exacerbate the problem. If there's other causes, there's always other things than just money that are throwing people off. Get to those root causes, start to implement some easy, quick, simple wins. paint the picture of a brighter future, and you'll start to see this situation improve. Thank you for the question. As always, leave questions, comments, thoughts, ideas. I'm here to help support and see you grow your business. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night.